of the working man. He built one of the early motion picture studios, creating not only movies for the silver screen, but also providing film coverage of the world's great news-making events. And he built an impressive collection of tapestries, armor, paintings, ancient sculptures, a passion that was born way back on that first trip to Europe with his mother. In other words, at the age when most people begin to think of slowing down, for him the ultimate building experience he had longed for was just beginning. The dream of creating his castle on a hill. Now that's simple enough to say, but it was quite another thing altogether to accomplish. This is what the mountain looked like before he started to build. Steep and rocky slopes and deep ravines. It was hard enough just to camp on it, let alone to build what he had in mind. The site he finally chose was a 123-acre spot, not far from where he used to camp when he was a boy. He was now face to face with a challenge. Most experts told him to forget the idea, told him it couldn't be done. He might have been tempted to believe them had it not been for a 47-year-old architect named Julia Morgan. She was a remarkable woman, a builder in her own right. Within 4 months of her first look at the property, Miss Morgan had supply trucks making their way up the 5-mile road she had carved out of the hillside. It was clear from the very beginning that this shy, brilliant woman had made hers a dream, her dream as well. For most architects, the location chosen to build would have been seen as an obstacle so daunting as to be impossible. But Miss Morgan saw it as a vital ingredient to the creation. But this is how she looked at everything in her life. It didn't matter whether it was becoming the first woman to earn a degree in a field dominated by men at the most prestigious design school in France, or the demand of designing and building more than 700 diverse projects. She met all these challenges with grace, patience, and hard work. That part of her has become legend. With the creation of the castle, a true partnership was formed. Something that gets talked about a lot, but is actually very rare. They saw themselves as co-architects, Hearst being the driving force in vision and design, Miss Morgan providing a sounding board to his flurry of ideas and the experience as to how to execute them. What she understood about Hearst is that finishing the castle wasn't what held him captive. It was the creative process itself. What I mean to say is, he changed his mind a lot. And that meant challenges she could only have guessed at before they started. To begin with, every structure had to be formed of reinforced concrete to protect against earthquakes. But that's all fine and good. But that meant that when a wall needed to be moved or room changed, wasn't just a matter of pulling down wood framing to do it. They had to tear down the walls of a castle. Living trees were often moved from one place to another in concrete containers weighing more than 600 tons, taking weeks to accomplish and at a cost of thousands of dollars. Hundreds of others were hauled up the mountain and planted in places Hearst thought were too barren. The main house, La Casa Grande, went through many design changes, with chimneys torn out and made taller, terraces that were covered over and completely rebuilt, bell towers that had to be raised higher to incorporate the bells. The huge outdoor Neptune pool was originally a small one just for the family, but when the vision expanded, the pool had to expand with it. In the end, it was built, torn out, and rebuilt 2 more times before Hearst was finally satisfied with it. All this required a full-time army of workers who had to be housed and fed for the better part of 15 years. Through all this massive effort, Hearst was happy. They say it was the happiest he'd ever been in his life. While keeping watch over the construction, he was also enjoying the rugged pleasures of the ranch again. And he was building and creating again. Never mind the frustrating changes. They were slowly transforming the hilltop into what he and Miss Morgan had envisioned and were determined to see become a reality. A vision that had drawn its inspiration from a particular type of architecture, one they had seen in Spain. It was simple and classic and timeless. Later, among the ruins of ancient Rome and Greece, they found their inspiration for their final creation of the Neptune pool. Fountains and stone or marble stairways that connect one level to another have the distinct feel that makes us think of the Mediterranean. The castle stairways mirror the feeling of those Hearst saw in Italy and southern Spain. The towers of the main house were patterned after a particular church tower in a small Spanish town. But the essence of the design for the towers can be seen in hundreds of cities and villages. The master builders of southern Europe had intriguing ways of using sculpture, of seeing the opportunities to create art, even in the most functional elements of a building. These details were not lost on Hearst and Miss Morgan, and you can see the care and thought they gave to those finishing elements of the castle. This is how they worked, compromising here and there, but always focusing on quality details and the overall effect of scale, balance, and symmetry. And finally, after all those years, the day finally came that brought the castle to life. exciting and magical it must have been for a young actor or actress, making a first trip to the castle at the invitation of Mr. Hearst.
Dear Mom, what if I told you I found a better place to swim than the old pond on the North Field back home? You never could have convinced me there was such a place. Not in a million years. Or not until last weekend, at least. I've made a couple of tries at flowery description, but they don't even come close. Best way to think of it is to imagine what a Roman emperor's pool would be like. Beats anything I've seen in Hollywood. So where is this place? It's part of the estate at San Simeon, built by Mr. William Randolph Hearst. And, if you can believe this as well, I was invited to spend the weekend as one of his guests. I almost couldn't believe it myself when I saw who I kept bumping into all weekend long. Do these names sound familiar? Clark Gable, Carol Lombard, Cary Grant, Claudette Colbert, Charlie Chaplin. The whole place is like a museum. I actually asked the head housekeeper if it was all right to sleep on the bed in my bedroom. Even places like the billiard room are filled with some of the most amazing things I've ever seen. Anyway, you learn right away that Mr. Hearst wants his guests up and around and doing something. None of this sleeping in late and breakfast in bed business. Somebody was always dashing across the main courtyard for a game of tennis. Or taking in the animals. Yes, you're reading this right. At Mr. Hearst's private zoo. And I'm not talking about pigs and chickens and ducks. Some of us braver guests set out one morning on a bone-crushing horseback ride over the mountains, led by Mr. Hearst himself. At the end of the trail, the tenderfoots made a beeline to take soak in a hot tub. And not just any old run-of-the-mill bathroom. After lunch one day, all the guests were suddenly informed that Mr. Hearst would like to see a play presented by all of us in 1 hour. We were then led to a huge room filled with costumes to choose from. It was dress-up heaven. I've heard that he'll even send for costumes from his studios in Hollywood. Speaking of Mr. Hearst, or the Chief, as he's called by those who work for him, he's a very interesting man, completely different from what I'd expected and what I'd heard. He's quiet, almost shy, but he loves to settle into a good conversation. He's very polite with women, dislikes people who drink too much, but he loves his little dachshunds. He spends a lot of time on telephones, which are everywhere. He runs his empire from the castle. People tell me that each day he has every one of his papers flown in. He pores over them, makes notes to his editors, and then sends them back. Every night, dinner is served in the main house, La Casa Grande it's called. Everyone gathers in this huge, wonderful sitting room. And then, suddenly, Mr. Hurst enters from his secret doorway and leads everyone into the great dining hall. I sat just 2 seats away from Mr. Hurst. I heard that the longer you stay, the further away you sit. A good lesson in overstaying your welcome, I suppose. Dinner time seems to be the most satisfying part of the day for Mr. Hurst. Talking with everyone about their day, making sure we've all had a great time. An amazing attitude for someone who appears to have everything, don't you think? Why should he care? He wouldn't have to share any of this with anybody. Anyway, back to the grind of real life. I have a new script to memorize tomorrow. Save this letter for me, would you? I may need to read it someday to remind myself that it all really happened.
Quite a story, isn't it? Probably no guest ever came away without feeling that they had experienced something truly extraordinary, that they had been part of a dream William Randolph Hearst had had since he was a 10-year-old boy touring with his mother. Hedda Hopper, the famous Hollywood columnist, once said, "Never has anything like the castle been built before, and never will anything like it be built again." Many things have been spoken and written about the man they called the Chief. But something that he might have said himself is that dreams are meant to be shared, because it's only through sharing dreams that they live on. He learned this lesson seeing the effect the work of the great builders and creators throughout history had on others. Learned from his parents, learned from his creative partnership with Julia Morgan. When you look up at this enchanted castle on the hill, remember that it represents the part of human nature that doesn't look back and think about what might have been, but looks forward and thinks about what might be. May it serve as an inspiration for all of us to look forward, to follow our hearts.